I want to talk about what we do when our faith in God feels like bull.
Yeah.
So, I was chatting, a fella was sitting here the other day, and he was talking about extraterrestrial life. And a lovely fella, very intelligent, wrote a great book on the topic, and seems to be very invested in the idea that there are indeed aliens. That I don't want to speak for him, but from what I got from it, it sounded like he was saying the U.S. government certainly has covered things up, and there's multitude of evidence. He's saying all this, and I don't care at all.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah.
It's that even if he's right, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I'm an apathalianologist or something. Like I don't care. And then I thought, that's probably what it feels like for atheists as we try to tell them about God. It's like this guy telling me about aliens. I'm like, I couldn't care less. It says a lot about you that you're interested in this, like what's going on in your home life, but I don't care. Yeah. And I was at Mass, I think recently, and I'm just like, maybe this is just all crap. It's the whole thing is rubbish. Yeah. None of it's true. And at some point in my life, I decided that it was, maybe because I had some emotional experience, and then someone gave me an argument that I wasn't intelligent enough at the time to pick apart, and so I latched onto that, and that boosted my belief, and now here I am. Have I not just talked myself into this elaborate fairy tale? I mean, and I don't think this, but I'm trying to play devil's advocate.
Yes, I understand. I've had those thoughts.
Yeah, there's a coherence to, say, Star Wars. Congratulations, doesn't make it true. There, you can make Christianity coherent, even as we show you the blatant holes in your theory, namely evil and God not making himself evident to those who really would like to believe but can't seem to be able to intellectually accept it. And so you have to then come up with a narrative that makes your story more sophisticated, more difficult, and then you cover it up with all this philosophical jargon. But it's not true. None of it's true. Now, I say that, and then I am reminded of something Lewis said, where he says, now that I'm a Christian, I do have moods where the whole thing seems very implausible. But when I was an atheist, I also had moods where that seemed implausible. Exactly. So what am I to do?
I think that's a great quote. That's what I was going to say, something that you, if you're in that boat, then you have to at some point make a choice. Right. And to me, the choice is whether to be what Kant calls, a misologist.
What's that?
Right. Somebody who hates reason, right? From logos and
if you make a choice,
you have to make a choice. So you're like, I thought I reasoned all this out. Right. But really what I did is told myself a self-congratulatory narrative.
Yes.
Right. For different motives that were underneath my intellect at that time. Right. And so to use Lewis's term, you've bulverized yourself. You've explained away what you believe by some other motives that are non-rational underneath your intellectual processes. Like the only reason why you're a Catholic is because you're a white male and it helps the patriarchy or whatever in your mind. Right. That's bulverizing you.
Yes. Right.
So you can bulverize yourself is what you're just giving an example of. And so then you have to make a decision. Well, is that how reason always is? Right. Because is it always going to disappoint me? Because I can always do that. I can always imagine a situation where I've talked myself into it.
My love love with my wife, why I moved to Steubenville, how I raised my children.
Yes, how you raise anything.
The most natural things.
You can attack reason and distrust it. Right. And you can even get to the point, and this is what Kant says, where
you could even be bulverizing your destruction of the reasons you have for God.
So you got to make a choice. You recognize, is this a self-defeating game? Right. And so you reject misology. Right?
Okay, misology.
Yes, the hatred of reason, because it's like reason led you astray. Now you've been living as a Catholic and you've wasted your time. Screw reason, right? F reason, I'm going to do what I feel now. I'm going to do what, like Nietzsche, just be whatever's innocently becoming in you. That's his idea. Don't take all this reason. Don't take all this thought that the cosmos has an end and there's an order in nature. All that's crap that's been made up by Socrates and Plato and Christianity.
Let's do LSD and watch SpongeBob SquarePants.
Anything you want to make yourself great. He probably wouldn't have said that. But anyways, the point is that's a hatred of reason because reason doesn't get you greatness or something that you ultimately want that's deep inside of you that reason is impotent to help you with. It just keeps screwing with you. Right, so you can be a misologist, Kant says, and just reject it.
It's like a woman who flirts with you but won't allow you to have her. You begin to resent her.
Yes, exactly. And so then you reject, let's say, that completely. And so that's misology. He says that's the temptation for all of us. And I think
Kant said this?
Kant did, yeah. And this is a temptation, I think, because we live in a very multicultural, pluralistic age, right? And we have a situation that's very different than
Thomas
civilization.
Bonaventure.
We live nowadays in a situation very different to the way that those guys lived, because then think about the different religions that were competing with them. It's like Judaism, Islam, maybe some Eastern stuff they heard, but like we have this proliferation of knowledge of religions from all over the world that exploded by texts and everything. And scholars started studying this in the 1800s intensely and came up with this pseudo theory of comparative religion. But the point is, they got all this knowledge and now we're trying to work through it. And we live in a culture now where there isn't a dominant spiritual form to our culture, right? We still have the sort of fumes of Christianity in our culture because lots of individuals are Christians, but the societal form is no longer supportive of a general spiritual vision. And so when people encounter religious disagreements, right, immediately what that does is makes them doubt their own religion, because they're like, well, if I was raised a Buddhist, I'd be a Buddhist. If I was raised a Mormon, I'd be a Mormon. And they do this thing where they think the epistemology is all on par, right? Sometimes philosophers call it the epistemic parity thesis. So you think that the plausibility of all the religions is basically the same. So the only reason for you to be a Christian, right, is because you like it, right? Or it makes you comfortable, or to change because it would be more comfortable to not be a Christian, have this guilt complex on me, right? Or whatever. So the only things that can motivate you are not issues of reason, but issues of compatibility, simpatico with your personality or whatever, right? And that's a temptation in our era. And so I think we need to go back to one of the bread and butters, on your show, right, is natural theology, right? There is evidence that we can look at. Right, there is evidence about the nature of God, who he is, what he's like, which help us in the examination of religions. We don't have no foundations going into it. So now back to your issue though about misology and hatred. So I think that's the situation where people grow up and they now no longer know how to deal with their most fundamental worldview commitments, right? And they think, well, reason led me astray. I was trained by my catechist or my Sunday school teacher in my case, right? And it was all wrong. So like, screw reason. I'm just going to do what I feel now. And what I feel now is, I kind of want to be a Zen Catholic right now, or whatever.
I want you to keep speaking because I'm finding this very enjoyable.
Yeah. So I think that we have to make a choice, going back to that point, between being a misologist, just admit that we hate reason. Well, then just do whatever you want then.
Couldn't it be just that I hate my reason? Maybe my reason led me astray.
I don't know what other reason you're going to use, right? You got no other options here, right? And so if you're a misologist, though, and you make a decision to hate misology, was that reasonable or not? So that's really the decision. You're like, screw it, I don't care whether it's reasonable or not, and just go and you just forget about it, right? You just suppress all that and then live your life, right, in pursuit of whatever you feel like.
Isn't there a different version of this, though, where you're not hating reason or not? You're more hating your access to reason. So you're hating, your ability to understand things. So, say you had one, I don't know, you thought you understood something, but then later you changed your mind on that because you're kind of trusting of someone making an argument or something like that. That's different than kind of like you fully really understanding that argument and then somehow it's not true. Yeah. Because the only way for that to happen is you didn't actually understand it in the first place, right?
Yeah, maybe I could say in the end it comes to the same thing, because when you make that decision, you can be like, well, this is what Kant says. Did you make a mistake in reason because you didn't conform to the norms and standards of reason, and now you're going to try to conform to the norms and standards of reason? So it's trustworthy, but your access to it was the problem. Then you're going to be committed to reason. Now that might not solve your problem immediately, right? But now you're committed to maybe I need to look at the arguments again. Maybe I need to look in detail at the objectors and entertain those better. Maybe I need to be more disciplined in my use of reason, right? And so it wasn't reason's fault. That would be to reject misology. It's not reason's fault. It's my access to reason. And we are prejudiced and we are biased, and that is true. That's why there's something going for the thing you said in the beginning, that sort of thought that you were sort of pretending, right? Which is, well, maybe I was biased. Maybe I just am a Christian because I thought I was. I had those same thoughts when I was in college, at a Baptist college. I tried to become an atheist. Yeah. And I thought, maybe this is just what my mom told me, and I love my mom, and maybe she was wrong. Maybe she was duped, right? And I'm duped too. And so to me, I pared it all down to me, it seemed like the most logically basic thing was, is there really a God who's personal, right? And what are the arguments for that? And I encountered apologetic arguments, right? And I thought they were pretty good, but then I could skepticize them. I could never refute them. I could never overturn them, but there's plenty of objections and other experts that are atheists and agnostics, even good people that are atheists and agnostics, that you're like, why don't they believe this is so? It must just be my bias, must be. So then you start thinking that, right? But then I mean, I think the inquiry at that point, it's multifaceted and multi-level. So natural theology, a misunderstanding of it would be, it's just sort of these like pure abstract propositions put in deductive or inductive form. That's sort of like maybe old school natural theology, maybe in the Renaissance or something like that. But now it's natural theology includes all the disparate facts of experience, that personal encounter you had with God when you were in that suit and you knelt down. Well, that's something you have to deal with. Also the arguments from the five ways. Also Anthony Kenny, who was an intelligent, amazing philosopher, like rejects this why. Like, so these are all disparate facts you put together, and natural theology is more like the explanation for all these facts. Like Sherlock Holmes, the guy walks in his office, right? And he's like, oh, well, he sees a like Masonic pin, his left hand's bigger than his right hand, he's got certain dirt on a certain kind of boot, and he like puts all these disparate facts together to say, okay, I know why who this guy is, where he was, and what he wants me for. So he puts these facts together, which are disparate. That's not like an inductive or deductive case to get to his explanation, but it's a path of rationality. So the reason I brought that up is because in my own case, I saw all the like kind of clear propositional arguments laid out, right, in order. But then there were lots of things that could skepticize all over. But something I couldn't get rid of was my own experience of God. And I could skepticize it. I could say, well, I'm projecting God, right? Because I was raised to think there's this God, so I'm projecting it, right? Sort of a Freudian thing or something, right? So bulverize myself, right? But I could also say, well, maybe not. Maybe it is what all these apologists are saying. So I'm in this like completely agnostic position. And so then I had this experience where one of my friends, he said, one time he ran into me and he said, hey brother, where's your joy? And I knew that there was something about my life that was up. It wasn't just my intellect, like in this sort of abstract thing, trying to figure out this, something about my life was up. So something deeper, like maybe my will, right? Maybe I'm bent or not untwisted enough, right? And so then by friendship and love, right, I eventually said, okay, and that got me back on track where I saw different arguments. I was able to overcome certain objections, and I can only explain that as a movement of grace. Now, sure, it's of course logically possible that this is all made up and it's not a movement of grace, but I'm like, how else am I supposed to explain it?
Yeah.
So to me, Christianity is true, right? Because it ultimately explains all of these details of all different sorts at all different levels, right? And so that's using that other kind of reasoning, not just linear kind of propositional
It reminds me of,
arguments.
again, Lewis, who said, I believe in Christianity like I believe the sun has risen.
Yes.
Not because I see the sun, but because by it I see everything else.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so this is something I'm working on now, and I don't have a worked out view on this, but to me it seems like a Christian who is in good faith and who's not, not corrupted by too much of bad philosophy. They just see it like the sun. They assent, and Newman uses this word, they really assent, right, that God is the creator, right? God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, all things visible. They assert that like there's a cigar right there. Now, once you get there, then it's like the foundation for everything else right? So that's more like, say, if you've talked about Reformed epistemology and Plantinga, that kind of view, right? It's like a properly basic belief for you now, right? It's one that you infer other beliefs from,
but which
right?
you don't have
evidence or natural arguments for.
Yeah.
But I think that view of Reformed epistemology, I would contest.
Yeah.
I think it can become a properly basic belief, but it nevertheless has all these support relations from all these disparate facts. And that might have been how you first got to the proposition. So you might have first got to it by this kind of complex inference. It's called an abductive inference, or an inference to the best explanation.
Yes.
But then as you experience life, everything makes sense in part of it. And now it's become a basic belief, because now you don't believe it from inference. You believe it on real assent, directly as a fact. You see it now as a fact. And I would say that's my experience. That's my experience, both going from trying to be an atheist to being a mere Christian, and then going from a kind of Protestant Anglican Christian to a Catholic Christian. I had that experience twice.
Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you liked, and if you loved, subscribe.